Hello literature connoisseurs. Let's begin chapter 19 of Left Behind. The chapter begins with Rayford and Chloe as they wait for Hattie to arrive. Chloe gets restless and starts wandering around while Rayford is being his typical ass of a self. Rayford concludes that he has dealt with the sin of his imaginary affair by projecting all the fault on Hattie. After all, she was somehow a willing participant in the mental gymnastics he does even though she had no idea about it. To Rayford, she is guilty until proven guilty. He realizes that he needs to stop wanting to not offend and get tough with Hattie. He needs to make her realize that Rayford is delusional one way or another. She needs to pay for the sin that he created in his own mind that she knew nothing about. Basically, projection thought crime. Rayford then concludes that anyone that does not believe that God was behind the disappearances are looking for any excuse to support what they want to believe. The irony is lost on him that he is just using God as an excuse for what he wants to believe. Rayford has started carrying his wife's Bible with him everywhere he goes. When he gets some free time at work, he reads it trying to draw attention to himself. Rayford believes that the prophecies in it are irrefutable proof that God exists. Not sure why they seem so impressive when the prophecies are anything but impressive. The Bible predicting that there will be wars and rumors about wars are as impressive as a fortune teller stating that tomorrow you will eat food. Rayford then holds to the failed prophecy of the two witnesses. He believes the prophecy about them had been completely fulfilled even though the Bible says they will use fire to kill their enemies, and that has not happened. Rayford then reflects on how the Bible says that in the last days people will come forward and offer peace during the troubled times, but they are not to be trusted. Yet, did not Jesus say in the Gospel of Matthew, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God"? James 1 verse 8 states that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. How about a double-minded God that keeps contradicting himself? The Bible also states, "Do not be like a boat tossed about on the sea." However, this seems to describe the character of the God of the Bible. It becomes clear that the God of the Bible in the Left Behind series cannot be trusted. Rayford calls Bruce and they discuss that they cannot worry about turning people off of the religion. Rayford confides that he is going to force Chloe to decide about his religion. Bruce agrees and says that the two witnesses are proof enough, ignoring that they failed to fulfill the prophecy about them. If you go to the website Rational Wiki, there is a great article on biblical prophecy and how to properly judge if it has been fulfilled. A search on biblical prophecy brought up numerous versions by Christian sites. The one thing that is obvious is that even among Christians they cannot agree on a criteria on how to judge if a prophecy has been fulfilled. A good analogy is thinking of prophecy as firing an arrow and hitting a bullseye on the target. However, with Bible prophecies we often see an arrow fired into a tree or some other object, then the target is drawn around the arrow after it is stuck to make it look like it was a bullseye. This makes prophecy unimpressive to anyone that does not already believe. Bruce orders Rayford to watch the news because of a breaking story. Rayford turns on the television and the news shows a large crowd of people falling to their knees and crying and weeping as the two witnesses preach. Rayford, who is an excellent judge in these matters, deems that he is witnessing the 144,000 converting. There is no real evidence to prove that claim or to prove that the ones on their knees crying are not merely ordinary believers in an overly emotional state. All we get told is that nondescript people are on their knees crying. They could be the families of the attackers that died. Rayford begins praying that God makes him persuasive that he is able to convert Chloe and Hattie with the manipulation he is going to try. Scene changes to Buck as he is still with Hattie. Buck feels that he needs his reporter's travel bag for some reason. He convinces Hattie that he will only be a few minutes and she reminds him that she needs to meet with Rayford shortly. He swears he won't be long. He gets his bag and Steve pulls him into a meeting with the owner. Definitely something he should have known about but apparently did not. The owner demands that both Steve and Buck answer his questions. He assures them that he will keep everything said confidential, ignoring that neither Steve nor Buck made such a promise. He begins with Steve and demands that he know all of Nicolae's plans. He has friends with various political figures and political connections, so he already knows what Steve told Buck about the press conference the next day. When Steve hesitates, he tries emotional blackmail on him. He states that Steve owes him because he did a favor for Steve by hiring him and paying him well. Steve opens up about Nicolae's plans with the United Nations. This is ridiculously stupid because first off, Steve has yet to start working for Nicolae. The hiring process would have included a non-disclosure agreement as part of the clause for hiring. To move the story along, we'll ignore this. Although Steve has yet to leave the newspaper, how could he learn of Nicolae's plans in such detail? The owner reveals some secrets from his sources and wants it kept quiet, but then why would he be telling a former employee that can't keep his mouth shut? Basically, no new information gets revealed because everything the owner says, Steve confirms. The owner then speaks to Buck and tells him that he has been asked about Buck after Eric's death. Since they both had been doing stories on Nicolae, the owner wondered if Buck was going to have an accident happen to him like it did Eric. Buck pleads innocence to knowing anything about what Eric was up to and what he was planning to do. When pressed, Buck assures the owner that he will be accepting Steve's old job. The owner turns his attention back towards Steve and again uses emotional blackmail to order Steve to tell him what he wants to know. Steve finally cracks and reveals all of Nicolae's plans, though both Buck and the owner doubt that Nicolae will get his way. Steve starts by telling how Nicolae pressured the current Secretary General of the United Nations to step down and endorse Nicolae to take his place. He did this by offering the Israeli fertilizer to him. In order to get the formula from Haim, he set up a 7-year peace treaty with Israel. It was also promised that he would rebuild the Jewish temple in Israel as part of the deal. Once the offer for Nicolae is made public, Nicolae refuses to accept it unless the world destroys 90% of its weapons and gives the remaining stockpile to the United Nations for supposed peacekeeping purposes, thus turning the United Nations into a dictatorship. Nicolae wants to relocate the United Nations headquarters to Babylon. The old city of Babylon that exists in modern-day Iraq had its ruins renovated and turned into New Babylon City. This is just nonsense because the Bible mentions Babylon even though it was destroyed long ago, but in order to make it fit they need to bend over backwards to create a narrative that fits. Remember, the authors cannot admit that their Bible is wrong, so they will make up any story to try and fit it. Which seems really silly since they had no problem changing the two witnesses. Hattie calls to interrupt and leaves a message for Buck that she cannot wait any longer and she's leaving. Buck scrambles after her, trying to convince the owner that the pilot she is meeting with may have a theory about the disappearances. The owner thinks a pilot's opinion is supposed to hold some relevance for some reason, but not sure why. It's like asking a basketball coach what it's like to work on an oil rig when he never has before. Hattie calls Buck and tells him that she cannot wait any longer and she drives off. The owner makes a snarky comment about Buck's work ethics as compared to the asshole of an owner that calls an impromptu meeting without any advance notice just to talk about unrelated work topics. Skipping ahead because they end up talking about the disappearances but nothing new is discussed. The owner, Steve, and Buck briefly describe the other theories but mostly focus on the rapture as they declare they know nothing about it. Buck uses the excuse that he needs to interview Rayford about his theory on the disappearances. The owner is intrigued and thinks it will be a valuable take to get a pilot's opinion. This makes no sense because why would a pilot's opinion be any more valid than anyone else? It's clear they are trying to get the characters to meet together, but they could have done it in a way that makes sense. They could have said that they were getting a diverse group to share their opinions and one person that was interviewed was a pilot. Buck wonders about Nicolae and doubts that he can be trusted for some reason. He wants to believe in him, but he is skeptical about how he will deal with Jonathan S. and Todd C. He thinks that once they are dealt with, then he will know if he truly can trust Nicolae or not. There are only a few chapters left, but it seems as if the authors are rushing to come to an end to the book. They seem to be trying to finish up the bad plot lines they have written, and it comes out like a child trying to fit round blocks in square-shaped holes. This ends chapter 19 of Left Behind. See you next time for chapter 20.